Welcome to the Brückner Sustainability TV. We are proud to present our new TV magazine, which is mainly dealing with the topic of sustainability in packaging. This important topic for the future we want to discuss here in our brand new studio with various guests from the value chain, and we will also show you what Brückner can contribute to a circular economy. Our topics for today are a comparison of mono and multi-material structures, a discussion with Hery Henry, the Group Head of Brand and Sustainability from WIPAK, one of the leading converting companies in Europe and North America, and with Karl Zimmermann, Sales and Marketing Director at Brückner Maschinenbau. Another highlight in our today's broadcast will be the presentation of the making of a monomaterial BOPE pouch, which is a future application for the circular economy. But now I want to welcome our first guest. Welcome Helmut Huber, the CEO of the Brückner Maschinenbau. Hello Helmut.
Thank you, Karlheinz. Welcome, dear spectators, to this first edition of Brückner's new Sustainability TV. I'm happy and proud to be able to introduce this new format to you. I'm absolutely convinced that with this small series of TV shows, we can make a valuable contribution to the topic plastics and environment, sustainability in packaging, or circular economy.
Thank you, Helmut. And with this, we are already in the middle of the topic. So plastics has been experienced a veritable roller coaster of public opinion over the last year. One time the hero, one time the bad guy. Nevertheless, it's not all good today, is it?
Indeed, you're right, Karlheinz. The topic of plastic packaging waste has been superseded in pandemic times by the growing awareness of the role of packaging in terms of hygiene, food protection, as well as security of supply. Nevertheless, the subject, packaging waste, must not be forgotten, especially in these times. Two examples. The growth of the online shopping business or the increasing need of the hygienic food protection lead to more and more waste. The solution here is clearly the circular economy, and we in Brückner are part of that.
And in this context, Helmut, we can often hear about monomaterial structures. And as I'm informed, Brückner is also deeply into this topic since many years, right?
Right. Plastic is well known from the daily use. Such type of packaging is consisting of several layers of film made out of different materials. For example, polypropylene, polyester, polyamide, polyethylene. The problem with such a multi-material packaging is it is difficult to recycle, in many cases not recyclable at all. That's why we at Brückner are researching and developing since many years in the direction of monomaterial structures. One raw material in all layers. This is the basic requirement for a good identification, a proper sorting, as well as a high quality of the recycled material. This approach is very promising, and I'm absolutely sure that our other guests will certainly have something to say about that.
Indeed, Helmut, thank you. This was a perfect transition to our next guests. I would like to thank you for your contribution today, and I'm sure we will see next time for our following series of the Sustainability TV. Thank you, Helmut Huber, the CEO of Brückner Maschinenbau.
Thank you, Karl.
I'd now like to welcome Mr. Hery Henry, Group Head of Brand and Sustainability from WIPAK. WIPAK is one of the leading converting companies in Europe and Asia. And secondly, I'd like to welcome Karl Zimmermann, the Sales and Marketing Director at Brückner Maschinenbau. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Great pleasure to be here.
Also, thank you, Karlheinz, for the nice introduction.
So we just jump right into the topic, and my first question goes to Hery. Hery, how do you rank flexible packaging, flexible plastic packaging in the value chain today?
Let me be very clear. It is one of the most sustainable solutions out there. In Europe, flexible packaging packages 40% of all products at only 10% of the plastic weight. 10% of the plastic, but 40% of the products. I think that speaks a clear language. The statistics are very clear. But it's also a sustainable solution for the future because we're able to now make flexible packaging as complete monomaterials, and in the future, the better converters out there will be able to do it from bio-based materials. So we can have it from renewables. It will be a renewable resource solution.
Today's multi-material structures, as you said, are difficult to recycle. And so can you talk about a little bit about these monomaterial structures and how they can help to meet the brand owner's requirements?
I mean, of course, we can already produce monomaterials at scale. So it is feasible to package all that is packaged in flexible in the near future in monomaterials which are fully recyclable in many, many regions, especially in Europe. However, the problem in my mind has never been the packaging value chain per se. The legislation is lagging behind. So I hear this a lot from politicians also on the EU level where they're saying we need to slow things down, we need to be careful because otherwise business will be in trouble. I tell you, representing business, I think I speak for many here, we've never been afraid of that challenge. We're always worried about not having a level playing field, right? So as long as we understand what the legal framework is, as long as we understand what the legal framework is going to be, so we're able to forecast what that's going to bring, business will always innovate against that. And so monomaterials is, in my mind, a safe bet because we can already do it and because the legislation is now catching up with industry's capability, especially in Europe, of producing monomaterials. But of course, the next step from then will be monomaterials based on recycled or renewable raw materials.
Thank you. Karl, could you give your opinion to that, what Hery told us?
Yeah, Hery already gave a quite nice introduction about this subject. And the flexible packaging, from my point of view, shows somehow the dilemma we are in. On one hand, it's a perfect material for packaging, but on the other hand, the society is not well prepared to handle this subject and how to handle the waste. So from that point of view, I think we have to see two main subjects. So one thing is to introduce the right collecting and sorting system. This is a must-have. And on the other hand, we also have to prepare, and this was already Henry said, the monomaterials, so make it fit for this recycling.
May I respond to that?
Yeah, of course.
Because I think you're spot on, and I have absolutely no doubt that companies like Brückner will provide those solutions in a timely manner. The problem, as you stated, has been that there's been a lack of infrastructure, which has partially been because of a lack of legal framework. But now we are beginning to see the legal framework in lots of different jurisdictions, especially around Europe again. But we also have an investment war chest. For instance, on the EU side, we have, 700 million earmarked for sustainable and circularity projects. So I think against that backdrop, it's fairly safe to say we're on a good path to achieving this kind of circularity and putting your money in recyclability, in monomaterials, and in the machines that allow you to be part of that value chain is a safe bet.
Yeah. We see monomaterials as part of the solution, yes, but what we also have to see, there is not one magic material that fulfills all these requirements. So there are different materials. So today it is polypropylene, it is also polyester, but in the future we also see polyethylene coming up. And these three materials, depending on the final application, will be used in the future for these kind of monostructure applications.
Hery, let me pick up one of the keywords you mentioned. It's the supply chain. So you as a converter and also Brückner Maschinenbau as a machine builder are not able to make the circular economy on their own. How do you bring your ideas into the whole supply chain? Could you describe it a little bit?
Well, I mean, first of all, we need to define sustainability in packaging very clearly. So sustainable packaging is packaging that is optimized for all parts of the value chain. So it's not just the end of life, but it's also not creating waste along the value chain. So it has to be efficient in production. It has to be efficient on the machine runs. It has to be as much as necessary packaging, but as little as possible. And the first order of the day, of course, is to sustain what's inside the package. So as an example, if you have 6 slices of cheese and you throw out 1 slice, the waste is equivalent to 10 of the packaging, right? So if we must have high value, high carbon footprint goods, such as cheese and meat or anything else that we consume, then we must make sure that we sustain what's in the packaging, and that's the first order. The second one is when we talk about adopting more sustainable packaging, of course, the consumer plays a massive role, right? So we've talked about legislation, we've talked about the legal frameworks, but the other part is the consumer, and we have to make the choice to choose something more sustainable as easy as possible. And then it cascades down the value chain all the way back to us who convert, when the consumer says, look, I will make a conscious choice because the retailer makes it easy for me to choose packaging that's more sustainable. And then the retailer will say, in that case, I will go to the packager or the people who provide the goods and say, look, you need to be sustainable in the goods that you produce, but also in your packaging. The consumer wants it, I will choose that. And conversely then, we in the packaging world will say, well, it's easy for us to innovate against that and tell you, look, we can have an 80%, that's something that we achieve at this moment, by the way, an 80% lower carbon footprint in certain packaging categories because you ask for it, the consumer asks for it, and we have the technology.
Let me jump in here. You talked about the consumer. Do you really think the consumer is willing to pay more for a sustainable packaging?
In a word, yes. And I've seen plenty of research on this, but I think that there's another element here which is really important. At the same time, the consumer, as a majority, believes that industry is to blame for a lack of sustainability. So that's how the consumer sees it. And in this case, we can agree or disagree with this, but first of all, we're all consumers. And secondly, in this case, perception is reality. If that's what the consumer perceives, that's what we have to take on board. On the other hand, the consumer has already in many, many countries, and Innova Market Insight, for instance, does a fantastic annual study on this, on whether consumers are willing to pay more. And unequivocally, from Indonesia to Mexico, from the UK to China, from Germany to France, the majority of consumers today says yes. We've also conducted an individual study for young people under 30 in Finland, and we asked them how much more, right? Because that's always the question, how much is more? And on a coffee pack that costs 4 euros, over 90% of consumers under 30 are willing to pay 10 cents more. And 10 cents on 4 euros, ladies and gentlemen, very easily covers the additional cost of having much more sustainable.
Karl, Hery was talking about more aspects of the sustainability besides the mere recycling. And I know that Brückner made efforts for many years that the production of the film on their machines is something that has to be more sustainable. And there have been important steps that have been undertaken in the past or also in the future. So maybe you can explain a little bit more about that.
Yes, thank you. So we in Brückner, of course, we have to give our contribution to this sustainability aspect. And we see today 4 areas where we can give such kind of contribution. So first of all is raw material reduction. So that means we, due to our orientation process, have the chance to go into down-gauging and keeping the properties or even improve properties. So this is number one. Number two, of course, is energy reduction. So we have seen the chance over a period of time. So during the last 10 years, we had the chance to reduce the energy, overall energy consumption, by nearly 50% in the process. So that also gives a big contribution to the sustainability subject. And number three is ready for recycling. So here, of course, we go clearly the direction into the monostructures and see here also the possibility for recycling and bring it back into the value stream. And all this together, of course, is ending up and improving the overall CO2 balance. So overall, we can say Brückner is on the right track and giving a good contribution to the industry.
Hery, let me come back to another aspect you talked about. You said that consumers worldwide are acting maybe differently, and you as a worldwide company, you can tell us maybe a little bit more. Is there a difference between Europe and the Asian markets? Is the EU legislative interesting also for the Asians to go a step behind and make the same things? Or do you see there is a quite difference between those regions?
So first of all, let's talk for a moment about how the consumer is acting, right? And the consumer has the intention to act in a sustainable way. I think we all do. The consumer will only act as sustainably as it is made transparent and easy for them. And that's part of the problem. When you go into a supermarket and you look at, say, 36, in my local Tesco's in London, there's 36 of the same cheddar cheese. They're fundamentally the same. They look fundamentally the same. If I'm there with children on a Friday night and I'm rushing through the Tesco's, it's highly unlikely that I will turn around every pack and read the small print to see which one of these has the lowest environmental impact. So we need to make it much, much easier to make a good informed choice around sustainability for all consumers as well as businesses. But then, of course, markets are different, legislations are different. Europe has not only 27 EU countries with different legislation, but there are also 64 regions that have regional legislation. So I think the harmonization still needs to be accelerated. But aside from that, Europe, of course, is on a very good path. The rest of the world, we see some very interesting solutions coming out of Asia, some parts of Asia, and most notably, perhaps East Africa as a market that's not so familiar to Europeans. So Japan is, of course, the world's most sophisticated packaging market. You'll always see innovation in Japan. But for instance, East Africa has managed to do something that Europe hasn't, which is put a price on waste. Right? So plastic waste is collected, and people who collect it are paid to collect it. So there is a market and there is a price. And they've basically leapfrogged one of the developments that we've had here, which is sort of the waste without sorting. To some extent. So they're also on a very interesting path, and they've shown us solutions on how to price recyclates and to put them back into the value chain. So very interesting developments coming our way, and the consumer, of course, will be at the forefront of this as long as we make it easy for the consumer to understand what is sustainable and what isn't.
Thanks. Let me come back in a minute. I first like to ask Karl, what's the view of a machine builder and the view of a worldwide active machine builder to the difference between the regions, countries, or maybe cultures?
Yeah, I fully agree with what Hery said. We have to come up with rules. We have to give information to the customer how to handle it. And we also have to see how the supply chain is willing to support this idea. Because if there is no engagement from all of us, we will never make it happen. So from that point of view, it is a must-have that we are cooperating together along the supply chain. And yes, you are right, Europe is at the moment, and also North America, we see it in the same way, are somehow the front runners. So they are already working on this subject and they have a clear view how to manage that. Other areas maybe are behind. So there are two options. The other areas maybe adopt the system established in Europe or in North America, and also they are finding their own way how to come up with their sustainability activities. So overall, yes, when we're talking to all our customers worldwide, we can see they have this subject on the radar, definitely.
Do I have your permission to quickly comment on Mr. Zimmermann's point?
Of course, go ahead, Hery.
I think you're spot on there also in mentioning sort of that we have a much longer supply chain that we need to look at than just the end of life of plastic, which is what society at large looks at. And I'll make a bold prediction right here. I think very soon we will be counting carbon footprints just the way we are counting calories. And we are only able to do that if companies such as yours in the middle of the supply chain and us at the beginning of that particular packaging supply chain understand what our carbon footprint is and understand and help through that carbon footprint make the consumer understand it's not just about what happens with the plastic when you've used it, when you've taken whatever is inside out of it. It's also about how well it runs on the machines, how efficiently it runs, how much electricity it uses there, how much production waste there is. That's also plastic that needs to go somewhere, even though the consumer doesn't see it. But when we work together in this fashion in the value chain, we're able to calculate the overall carbon footprint and give the consumer and the retailer much more transparency in the decision-making of what is and what isn't sustainable.
This is a good point, and I may come back to the sentences you said before, because you said we have to make it more easy for the customer to take a decision. In your example, I found very nice with your children in the supermarket Friday evening. You don't have the time to turn around every package and to look what's the carbon footprint or whatsoever. So maybe this is the last question for you from my side for today. Maybe in a few words, how could the package of the future look like that customers get the necessary information easier and faster?
That's an interesting question. I think we need to distinguish between two types of consumption here, right? So you've got the sort of the immediate consumption and you've got long-term consumption. Immediate consumption, imagine for instance a pizza. You want the best pizza when you order it on your mobile phone on a Friday night when you're going to go for Netflix and chill, right? So you want the best pizza, and then the satisfaction of the packaging being sustainable or the pizza sustainably produced comes after the fact of purchase, right? Then there's so you feel good afterwards, and you might go back to that same brand of pizza because it was more sustainable later on. So the next time you think about it. Then there's the other type of consumption which is based on sustainability, and you justify the purchase by sustainability. So for instance, you're thinking you need a new winter jacket. Then you realize you don't really need a new winter jacket, and it's actually not that good to consume because it creates an environmental footprint. So then you look for the more sustainable option and are willing to pay a little more. But in both of those cases, the transparency of the information is absolutely key. Whether you make the decision to go back to something more sustainable or you lead your decision-making with sustainability, the packaging needs to reflect, and not just the packaging, but the product and the packaging need to reflect on the packaging whether this is more sustainable or not. And we now have a traffic light system for food ingredients, for instance. You can see immediately, oh, this has a lot of fat and salt and sugar. It's red, it's yellow, or it's green. Why don't we have the same for the carbon footprint, for the environmental footprint? It's not hard to implement.
Good idea. Let me take this up, Karl. We have been talking about monomaterials earlier, and we have been talking about BOPE in special. And I now would like to make a switch because especially BOPE could be one and one solution for the future. So maybe you can talk a little bit about this before we have a look at the making of a BOPE pouch to show our guests and our spectators that this is not only R&D, but this is reality. So a few words about BOPE, please.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we see it as a quite, let's say, interesting new subject for us, as BOPE was not existing in the past. It was existing for one or the other application coming from a different process, from the bubble industry, but in the standard process so far it was not established. And now we have seen the chance that BOPE could give a substantial contribution to this sustainability subject, because there are already existing collecting and sorting streams for polyethylene existing. So that could give a certain push into this PE subject. And we started our development a while ago to see what can be done with such a PE structure. And at the end of the day, we have done a lot of trials and testing on our technology center, of course, with leading raw material suppliers to see can we make a good enough structure that fulfills the requirement of the whole supply chain. And producing a film, of course, is just one part of the truth. You have to see, and this is what Hery just mentioned, is we have to go through the entire supply chain. So having the film produced, then you have to do the proof of concept and see, can we do a barrier application, bring a coating on top? Can we do printing? Can we do laminating? And can we make a pouch out of it? Yes, and here you can see the result. So we went really through the entire supply chain. We have done all these tests with existing machine setups, and we got really the information from all of the partners coming in this project together that they said, yes, BOPE has done the proof of concept and is really a good supplement to the existing structures.
And this small video will prove right now. Karl, looking at this video is very impressive, but I know that for you especially it is important to say that BOPE is part of the future, but you as Brückner surely don't forget the, so to say, traditional materials which are used in packaging.
For sure, the existing materials like polypropylene, like polyester, will stay in the business. So depending on the final application, we are working also on dedicated monostructures for these materials. And at the end of the day, the brand owner or the retailer or whoever has to decide which way to go and which material to be used finally.
I think there's a lot to love about this product. So first, there's two things I'd like to highlight. Right? First of all, It's a pouch solution, which is a lot lighter throughout the supply chain, and is a lot more sustainable than similar, for instance, rigid plastics. But then the other thing is it's basically utilizing an underutilized recycling resource, right? So one of the problems we have with recycling infrastructure is that even what we have is not used to the full, and that's the worst kind of waste. We could do it, but we don't have the volumes of material to put into them to properly recycle. So it's no good in being recycle ready if it's not actually recycled, and I think this one really hits a sweet spot in that sense.
Thank you, Hery. This was a perfect cue for this discussion and also for the end of our broadcast. Thank you, Karl. It was a great pleasure to have you both with us, and I guess our spectators will get a real bunch of ideas out of your discussion. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching Brückner Sustainability TV. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any remarks, if you have questions, if you want to give us feedback, of course a friendly one would be appreciated most, please use our email address sales@brückner.com. That's it for today. This was the first part of the Brückner Sustainability TV, and we hope to see you soon. Same place, same topic, sustainability.